Welcome to Mark Oliphant College. Mark Oliphant College was an idea to actually change the outcomes for children whose lives and whose communities had been in poverty forever. And the statement was made in 2010, demography is not destiny. So let me talk about a brief history of MOC World. Mark Oliphant College was built to replace five schools. It was announced in 2006 that this would happen. It was announced preemptively by Dr. Jane Lomax-Smith, who was then the Minister of Education, and the communities were consulted afterwards. The reason the schools were considered failing is their results were abysmal. They were in incredibly broken down and run down accommodation, and their enrolments had fallen to levels. For example, Smith Creek had 40 students at it. So the new school was announced in 2006, and it opened in 2010 and on the old site. So we moved in May 2011. There were some design principles. I wasn't appointed at the stage in 2006 that it would be schools within a school, that there would be smaller units within a bigger school. You've often heard the term super schools. We were the super school everyone talked about because it was considered to be so big. There was also going to be things that they were going to put in extra leadership to support the development of the school, and my appointment was one example of that. I came from a similar school, Ocean View College, and was asked to lead the school, and in fact won the position. But there was also going to be a high commitment to ICT. When you walk around the school, you'll notice the buildings look different. They're more open space, they're more planned, there's more glass, but they were meant to represent the 21st century. But everything else was the same, especially at the beginning. We had the old community, the staff all got to stay if they wanted to, and we had the old buildings. So what changed? Well, first of all, we believed our community needed to develop a sense of entitlement, that they were entitled to this new world order, that they didn't need to be scared about it, that it was their right to have buildings that were in tip-top condition. There was right to have resources and facilities and the best teachers we could provide. It was actually quite a massive issue when we first came here. Kids were actually a bit frightened and a bit scared, and so were some of their parents. We did that also by identity and ownership. We made a commitment that there would be 4 sub-schools. They go from birth to year 2, so that's junior primary and preschool, and some care facility. Then you have year 3 to year 6, in the primary years, year 7 to year 9 in the middle years, and year 10 to 12 in the senior years. We took the Eastern States model and put year 7 in the first of the secondary settings. Many people who've been in primary schools will tell you that they think year 7s are too old for primary school, that they need a different environment. So we actually did that by putting them as middle years. But we also had ownership. When you walk around, you'll find the uniform is red for early years and primary years, blue for middle years, and white is the main theme for senior years. The base is always grey, but that's the difference. So different uniforms. Why do the early years and primary years have the same colour? Because that's where the most expense is and kids grow the quickest. So that we thought we'd keep the colours red. But we also put teams together. Initially we had a head of sub-school, and Dean's career here started as the head of primary years. We had a senior leader too. You may know the term as assistant principal, and originally their job was learning engagement. Every sub-school has a counsellor, and they still do, and we developed other leadership along the way, and we had teachers. However, by 2015 we've refined it somewhat considerably. Teachers only teach in one sub-school, so if you're appointed to the early years, you will only teach in the early years, which means not only do you have less people you have to know, but also the kids get to know you really well, and the middle years and senior years. And people every 2 years get to elect what sub-school they go to. And we found that there is very little movement. It's been a wonderful model. We have far more leadership now than we did. When we first started, we had 13 people in leadership. This year we'll have 24. So it's nearly doubled. And we've replaced the head of school by an executive leader who goes across 2 sub-schools. And the reason for that was to give us more density at a lower level. The world of MOC, in fact, the world of education spins very quickly. For those of you new to your career, be prepared. I was talking to people and saying that one of the things I can remember is when we weren't even called the Department for Education and Child Development. In my history of the department, we've gone through at least 7 name changes. So everything changes. In the last 6 years since we started, the Australian curriculum has become mandated. And for those of you in secondary schools, in the secondary sector, when we first started, we used to talk about the new SACE because SACE was undergoing such a change. So they were there. But what the school has done is engage with a whole range of people to actually develop who we are and what we are. And those people have included Professor Stephen Heppel, who you'll get to meet during the course of this year. He is, if you want to Google him, world-renowned in terms of looking at space and looking at how children will astonish us with their learning and digital learning. He has become our thinker in residence, and if you look on our website, www.moc.sa.edu.au, you'll actually be able to see links to the body of Professor Heppel's work. We also have an arrangement with High Tech High, which is noted as one of the 10 most innovative and leading schools in the world, and it's been done that by a number of publications. They believe in a less is more curriculum, which is we're not a Christmas tree school. We do not take on everything that happens. So we have a focus on core curriculum, and in terms of our specialist subjects, we actually have children do them all, and they don't get to specialise until year 10. Otherwise, everybody does the same core curriculum. There is a core that we all do. And so we don't have children at year 8 choosing subjects, like what would they know, is my humble opinion. So we do less and we want to go deeper in it. But the other way that is so important from High Tech High is we have a massive componentry, and you'll hear about this, about project-based learning, that we want to show children what is the importance of doing mathematics, whether it be in art, whether it be in home economics, whether it just be in actually being able to count and add. So we have a huge componentry of that, and that's developed. And we have exhibitions twice a year that go through the whole school. And so the school is open for children to have their parents come in and look at the work they've done or present the work they've done. It's quite an amazing achievement. To get entitlement and the sense of what could happen, we've made a very early partnership with the University of Adelaide and developed a whole range of programs. So our children go to university from year 1. Which is the Tentastic program, which is learning how to count to 10, all the way through to year 7, to year 9. There are a whole range of things. So their children have become more and more used to the fact that you can live at Smithfield Plains, you can live at Manapara, and you will go to university, just like everyone I'm talking to has. So that was really important. And Compass is Find Your Way to University. Again, if you look on our website, our partnerships, look at the University of Adelaide, you'll see that. What we also worked out is that, as well as doing this, we wanted our children and our young people to have more hope, to be more resilient, to when there were knockbacks, and there are certainly significant ones in their lives. Let me not kid you that this is not a very hard place at times to teach in for a whole range of reasons. And so we have a massive commitment to positive education, and we espouse the principles of PERMA through the work that we do, and that will continue. One of the things we have is a counsellor in each sub-school, but we have on all our programs, we actually have a major commitment to positive education, to actually building up children, building their resilience, building their sense of hope, their sense of well-being, and at the same time we hope to. Similarly, we have a commitment to maker space, which is a new term, but kid learning by doing, the classics of some of the specialist subjects in secondary that the kids always want to do. Home ec, tech studies, art, stuff that you do, make and do stuff, the stuff that we do in early years where kids do play-based learning. So we talk about maker spaces where kids tinker and get to play. There are very little things called the shed down the back. We used to get hammers and nails. So we're trying to build them into our process. And on top of that, we've actually been looking at very much that one of the things that we need to look at, how do we put coding and computer science in a curriculum that's already overcrowded and not being a Christmas tree school. So there's some of the challenges that we work on and look at how we're doing. And I talk about the term third spaces, which has been one of our huge developments. That there are spaces in schools that you own as a classroom teacher, or a specialist facility, but there are spaces that should belong to everybody, and everybody should feel comfortable in it. And so, for example, our library, which if you looked at early pictures of the school, everyone said was beautiful. Everyone loved it, except the kids. And the kids' feedback was it was cold, it was sterile, we don't like coming in here. This is what we want. We want a recording studio. We want a cinema. We want our books to be different. The books were not being borrowed. So let's put the books out where the children are. Maybe they'll borrow them more. Let's bring other things into the library. Let's make it a third space we all love and use. And finally, explicit curriculum. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the concept of we need to be explicit about how we teach, what we teach, and sometimes it's called direct teaching. So the first big one is that technology will be used at Mark Oliphant to level the playing field. So every child, as I said, from reception to year 12 has a computer or laptop in some variation. Now, the receptions tend not to get their iPads until after a term. So that becomes, that just put that little codicil around it. We want them to settle in first. From year 2 to year 6, the iPads stay in the classrooms. Although a child has their own iPad, they don't go wandering with it unless it's in lesson time. From year 7 to year 9, your computer is yours for the time you're at school. So in terms of 6 hours a day for 5 days a week. Okay. From year 10 to 12, we supply a computer that they take home. This is a cost-free program to the students. There is no cost paid. In fact, the fees at this school are kept at school card level. We do that because there is an acknowledgement by both the federal and state governments about the poverty levels in our community, so we do get extra funding. But we've made the decision that we want every child to have a computer, because if we didn't, some might have them, but very few would. But it has changed the way we're thinking and teaching. So we also have Facebook pages, and you'll be asked, especially if you're on Facebook, to like one of our pages. We would ask you make sure 2 things about Facebook: that you never friend a parent or a student. I will actually get very grumpy if you ever do. There are huge reasons for that. Some of you actually have outside connections. Just be careful about that stuff. Certainly never a student, and that's particularly for secondary. That many of us have, I'm one of the few people that actually goes by the name, and many people have another persona. So Mr. Dean Clark is MOC Mr. Clark, and that's the page he set up. And so there's his public persona and then his private Facebook. Keep your Facebook private, but we believe in Facebook. We have nearly 2,100 people like our main Facebook page. In addition, there are Facebook pages for the early, primary, middle and senior. And the preschool. We feed everything through the pages, plus there's a wellbeing page. Dean Clark runs a page on digital technologies. Some of the pages, like digital technologies and wellbeing, we send out articles that we hope people will be interested in. Others have information. So we do that. Lots of our staff have e-portfolios where we will require you to have a digital portfolio of your work. AITSL requires people now to have digital portfolios. We will support you in doing that. But one of the things that we'll talk a bit more about, you'll hear about on Friday, is our work in iBooks and how we're having all our curriculum. This is English and maths to start with, in iBooks, which is a common core curriculum. But we believe technology must be used to level the playing field. So here we are now, 2015. We're 110 teachers strong. We've grown from 65 when we began in 2010. And of that 65, there are less than 30 of the original people. The others haven't fled in terror. Most of them have had promotion or moved closer to school. Even though this is being recorded, I'll be honest, for many of you this is a trek to get here. For many of you it's your first permanent position, if you have been appointed to a permanent position, and so in a number of years you'll be looking for a position closer to home, and people come here to get permanency. We are a teaching school for staff as well. We have one of the youngest staff cohorts in South Australia. We're very high profile. If we sneeze, the Education Department gets a cold. That's to do with the fact that we have so many children and because we play in so many spheres educationally across the world. Enrolments are a constant issue for us. take a deep breath, but we will cusp 1,600 children here this year. You won't see them all the time because they don't all come to school every day. That would be wonderful if they did. But because you work in your sub-schools, it's only when you've got yard duty you'll go, goodness gracious me, there are a lot of children out there. And I don't really like those blue shirts or red shirts, but you'll actually get to work out how we do it. In between times, since we started, DECD has also had massive changes. There are no regions anymore. We're now part of a partnership, and our partnership is the Peachy Partnership. And during the year, you'll hear more about that. But our plan and planning has evolved and developed and continues to do so. So let me just take you through. As I said, in 2010, when we began, the 4 key things were schools within a school, how we do the ICT, how we get a curriculum map from birth to year 12, and what were the issues about literacy. We didn't even think about numeracy. And you'll see how that developed across 2010 to 2013. I'm not going to stop there, but it's the stuff about that you lose in schools that you've attended forever, because they've gone on forever. So we still have our history quite fresh, but it has been something we've worked on every year about how we can continue to improve. So we had 5 challenges that we talked about. They were entitlement, they were expectations. When we first came here, it was never expected children would go to university. Enrolments, we couldn't fit everyone in, and schools often measure their success by being full. We don't think that's good enough. Excitement, when we started, it was really an exciting place to be. Sometimes now, we think, oh, we've been here for a while. It's not that exciting. So we look at now moments, and last year's now moment was we set the Guinness World Record, which is on the front of the 2014 yearbook, for a clapping game. And we're looking for a Guinness World Record to set this year that can have the whole community involved in it, and hopefully can be silly, because being silly is good times. And can we deliver? Because remember, our mission was to change the educational and life outcomes of groups of children and young people whose the lives of their community for generations had been marred by poverty. So what have we done after the first 5 years? Our running records levels at year 2, now running records levels are taken for year 1 and year 2, and they're taken twice a year in their formal statistics. Theirs are now 12% above the state average and 32% above our index of disadvantage. Schools have a disadvantage index which goes from 7 as the most advantageous school, so you'd be looking at your Linden Parks, your Brighton primary schools, through the whole spectrum down to 1, which is considered the most disadvantaged. In the metropolitan areas there are a number of primary schools, there are 2 secondary schools, and there's 1 B to 12 school, and that's us. The Lands are a Category 1 school. So that was it. So we're 32% of index of disadvantage, and by year 2, 81% of our children were in the top band group 21 to 26. One of the things that we do about expectations is we say that being in 21 to 26 isn't good enough. We want you in 26 post 26. Our SAFE Stage 2 results equal the state average completion rate this year of 94%. Last year they were 91%, and I was so miffed because the state rate was 92% and we didn't quite meet it. In 2011 it was 68% and the state rate was 91%. So we've actually grown significantly. But even more important is that the children who start, so we don't siphon off the children. So the boys and girls, the young people who start year 12 in January, this year we managed to keep 85% of them to the end of the year. And so we've kept them there to the end of the year, so they were potential completers. And of that group of students, 94% got their SAFEs. So 85% from where it was in 2000, 15%. So in real numbers, in 2011, that was less than 20 children graduated. And when you walk around the school, you'll actually see the graduation polls. We actually don't have honour boards. We actually have polls that are outside building 11, which actually have children's names on them. So everyone who graduates gets their name on a poll. And the Ducks is actually, their name is highlighted. In that plan, year 3, 5, 7 and 9, we're still way below the national mean score. It is one of the things we get most depressed about. But our trend has shown that we've decreased the gap. Our issue is it's never been fast enough. So we need to increase that, as well as our SACE Stage 2, getting kids their SACE was the first step. Now we need to increase the numbers of going to university, and that will go over 20 this year. Of this, probably go close to 30 of the 70 children who graduated. But now we want to get their ATAR scores higher so they have more choices of where they go to. So now we talk about the new developmental stage, 2015. We have, if you look at the O in the middle, it represents to some way the earth, MOC earth, earth to MOC. We have a vision, a mission, our principles and non-negotiables, our pillars, and to our outcomes. So let me go through them. Our vision is to be recognised as a school that the future is now. 2 reasons for that. One is we think that teaching and learning needs to change. How I went to school, terrifyingly, is probably exactly the same way as how you went to school. The schools would have looked the same, they would have felt the same, they would have smelt the same. We are 15 years into the 21st century. Most of you in this room will live out the 21st century. Every child at this school up to year 10 was not born in the last century. Yet still our schools just replicate what we did. People would forget the fact, like people who say we shouldn't have mobile phones. Every one of you has a mobile phone. Every one of you will be looking at your mobile phone 20 to 40 times a day. And yet we in schools say, no, that hasn't happened. So the world is rapidly changing. The jobs that our young people leaving school now, they won't be there in 5 to 10 years' time. It is estimated that these children will have over 20 career changes. They have to be the most educated we can. We have to have people who are flexible. We have to be flexible. So our vision is, yes, the future has to be now. But the other thing about this is you cannot ask children to come back and do their education again. You can't say, oh, sorry, we stuffed that up because we gave you a lousy teacher in year 3, so you can just do year 3 again. You never get it back. That level of onus and responsibility by teachers is enormous, and we see it as enormous. Our mission is to make learning better, and this is a classic Stephen Heppel phrase. We think if learning is better in all those nuances, he says it's not complicated, but it's proper complex. So if I got that it's proper complex stuff. To make learning better, to have children who are engaged, and sometimes they won't be engaged, and sometimes you won't be engaged. But how we do that in a digital age, by saying schools are not in a digital age, is actually just denying a fact of life. And we want and we think it's for you as well to make your learning better. So we have a mammoth commitment to professional development, of which Make Learning Better is our iconic once a year 2-day conference. 1 day is on a weekend. We'll get it in your diaries. We'd like you all to be there for both days. Plus, it's part of your AITSL professional standards. In between time, we have a range of quite phenomenal guest speakers and people who work with us who come into the school. Being a school of this size, of course, you can get people, and one of those will be John Fleming, who'll be doing work on explicit teaching that you'll hear more about. So these principles that we were formed with were before the school began in 2010. So schools within a school is still a key principle. Innovation in digital technology and in other ways of how we use space is a cornerstone of our practice. We will have strong connections with community. Now, too often in the past, that has been your local community. But children, we want our children to travel. We had children who got on the bus for the first time to go to Adelaide and actually said, because we teach Chinese at times here, and said, are we going to China? We have children here who've never been to the beach. This is not just country stuff. Outer metropolitan areas have these issues as well. We want children who have connections and community. So when you walk around the school, you'll see signposts that actually say how far away things are and what direction they are. They are both mathematical concepts and their world knowledge. The difference between our children achieving high and the children of Linden Park and Brighton, or my own children, or Mr. Clark's children, or probably your children if you have them, is their general knowledge and their exposure to a whole range of information and building up their vocab. Very interesting piece of research. So we have a global connection. Our children think nothing of Skyping or doing quad blogging with people overseas, but also for you. I'm hopeful that for all our staff, the opportunity we can present to you for either travel overseas or interstate, it doesn't happen in your first 2 weeks here, trust me on that, but we do try and bring in a range of things. But we also believe that our students can and will achieve. So seriously, if within a term of you being here you actually think our children can't achieve, you need to come and have an honest conversation with me. Our children have many learning difficulties. There are 200 children who attend this school who have NEPs. That's probably bigger than many of the schools you've come from. 200 children who have NEPs. We got 85% of our children with NEPs through Year 12. We got all our special class children through Year 12 with their SACE. We believe that but having an NEP is not a reason for you not to achieve. We have over 10% now, close to 15% of students from non-English speaking background, particularly African. Again, they have much higher aspirations about what they'll do, but we believe all our children can and will achieve. It's not you can achieve, but we will achieve, and we'll work with you to do that. There's some non-negotiables about being here. Children must be able to trust you. That doesn't mean you keep secrets from them, keep secrets from us, or they tell you secrets, but that trust, that they know that you like them. That can be really hard sometimes, but they know that you want to be here and you want to be their teacher. Relationships are paramount and relationships are child-centred. Let me be very clear. This school does not exist to provide you a salary. This school is not for the teachers. Yes, it's a great place to be and we try and make it the best, but it is not my job to pay off your mortgage. We are not set up for the comfort zone of teachers. Clearly, the whole focus of our being here is that our children and young people will achieve. They are the focus of our, and sometimes we can lose that in schools, and schools get set up for the comfort zone of teachers. We must have work at the children's level, so you will be asked to differentiate in your classes. As I said, we have a significant number of kids of NEPs. We have a number who English is not their first language, and a whole range of other reasons. Kids who will come to school hungry. Many children will come to school hungry, and not because, like my children who came to school hungry because it was a choice not to get up and have breakfast because, that would mean I get an extra 10 minutes in bed. This is because there is no food in the house. That's also another issue, that you are not the welfare provider. If those issues happen, you need to talk to the leadership in your sub-school about what can be done, about how can you support. But if you get dragged into the poverty trap of these poor children, nothing's ever right for them, it will be a very unhappy existence for you here. So they must have work at their level and they must belong. And this is the thing we're really working on. We've been really concerned about attendance levels and why children don't come. Sometimes they don't come because it's too hard for their parents to get, but why do children not stop coming to school? Why don't they feel like they belong? Why don't they think this is a safe place to be? It's one of the challenges we look at all the time. Our attendance rates are not good. Our attendance rates range from, the highlight is usually about 94% in Year 4, so if anyone's got Year 4s, they'll always be there. And they go down either side. It's really interesting. But that's actually one of our real challenges, that they belong, they have friends, and they develop empathy, they develop caring for other people. The more we do that, the less bullying there will be. The other thing I need to say is, of course, we have bullying at the school. Of course, we have issues. They all happen, and with 1,600 children, it's going to happen. But I want to talk about the 4 pillars of MOC, and we've developed these as we've gone through. Entitlement. So the children are entitled to these learning spaces. They must be kept the best we can possibly keep them. We are a private-public partnership school. We do not own these buildings. The Education Department rents these buildings, and then we're a sub-tenant of the Education Department. So if you want to get a light changed in your room, that should be okay, because that would be a health, welfare, safety issue, and you will send and we'll talk to you about that. Don't get hung up on it, how that happens. However, if you want to do something that would make your room look a bit more attractive, like hang a painting on a wall, that can be a very protracted process. And we look at how we can do it. So being in a private-public partnership school is quite different. But we want these learning spaces to be the most vibrant, the most exciting that they can possibly be. We want in every classroom, and one of the rules I'll talk you is nothing on glass. Okay? Nothing on glass. I will go completely ballistic and tear it off your walls if I walk around into a learning common and find you've blocked over the glass so you've gone into a private empire. Your classrooms are to share, whether you be in an art room, whether you be in a science lab, that people can see that there are all sorts of supervision, and you'll hear that all the time. Well, of course, we have virtual entitlement as well, which is what the computer system is. Engagement, the structures of being in smaller teams. So the team of staff ranges from 22 in the primary years, teaching staff, up to 35 in the senior years. So you actually will think of yourself more often as a member of that school, the primary years at Mark Oliphant or the early years at Mark Oliphant. And in the early years, it kind of subsets to the junior primary and the preschool simply by time factors of how people work. So you'll have your team of teachers, which means for the early years, that's about 400 children, 100 are in the preschool. So you really see 300. In the primary years section, again, it's about 300, 350 now. In years 7 to 9, it's about 420. And year 10 to 12, it's again about 420. Now, with all those children here every day, you're suddenly down to size of schools that you'd go, I can relate to that. You know, I was in a school that had 200 kids or 250, because that was what it will feel like most times to you. So the structures. But the other thing is the project-based learning, that kids constantly are engaged through our processes, but that their curriculum, that they can see a relevance to it. It was okay for me to do upper calculus, because I was a maths nerd, but I understood why I might use it. Many of us don't understand why we might need it, and when you don't understand and do not have a range of backgrounds, I'm not just saying families that say you will do this, then you don't do it. So that happens. Empathy is another pillar. We want kids to have positive relationships. Often this is the only place they get positive relationships. Often the most significant adult in their life is you. Now the corollary of that is that often is not true as well. But we have a number of parents who come in and do not behave appropriately. I'll be lying to you and sitting here and setting you up by saying it will all be sunshine and light. What I'm saying to you though is if there are any issues in those range of things, then we have structures to deal with it. And we have ways of dealing with it. But what we want is mutual respect. We want you to respect the parents. We want you to respect their children. We want you to respect their relationship. Sometimes you're not going to like their relationship, and that's when you need to debrief it. But you need to know where you stand in this. You will not be treated by respect by a lot of parents because their first action is to lash out. And teenagers don't give you respect anyway until they know you really well, because that's being a teenager. So there's a whole range of things. But we worked out that our results are only going to improve if we actually have explicit teaching as well. We need to have some direct teaching of our core skills of maths and English so that we narrow the gap for all our children. We narrow how our children produce. And so one of the things that we'll go through on Friday, but you'll have in your sub-schools, is we have, for English and mathematics, from R to year 10, we have an extremely specific program of instruction. This is not a scope and sequence. This is not, I'm going to go, this is actually, you'll teach this in week 1. You'll teach this in week 2. We also have things called warm-ups. And we have learning intentions that we want to have on the board. So a whole range of things. This is our 4th pillar. We've been building towards this to get that last great leap, to get those 94% of children who've got their SACE to 98%, but to get their ATARs up so they have greater choices, to get our NAPLAN results up, but basically to give these children far better odds than we actually need to do. We need to do explicit teaching. So our outcomes are, we want our children and young people know they belong, and that we have strong connections with our community, local and global, and high-achieving students and staff. So the 5 MOC challenges now, it's now a given about entitlement, but there's a corollary to that. Our kids just take a lot of stuff for granted now. And so we're talking about rights and responsibilities. And that's a challenge as we grow as a community. Think of our school as basically being a bit of a teenager now. So everyone, all the gloss has gone off of it. It's not bright and new and shiny, all bits are falling off. So how do we actually keep the sense of entitlement, and we actually keep that in our forefront, and what does that mean now? Expectations, how to go from getting good results to getting great results. We could come back with our enrolments and our results as they are, and you don't know. Like, people will say to you, oh, you go to Mark Off and it's really tough there, you know. Those kids are really, you're right, and you can say, yes, they are. But there'll be another group who say, oh, you know, we heard about their results and all this stuff. But it's the stuff of how do we keep pushing ourselves. The enrolments is a massive concern. We have the second strictest enrolment zone in South Australia after Adelaide High. Ridiculous. But it's true. We have people across the road who can't get their kids in. Once the levels are full, they're full. Just to give you an example, reception has got 100 children in it. We have 5 classes reception, so there are 20 each. If you were in a Category 1 school, you'd expect to start with 17 children. We have to start with 20 because we've said we'll take 100. We're meant to have 55 in reception. We have 100, and that 100 is going through. We have 180 children as our maximum number for Year 8 to Year 12. We had enrolment applications for 250 children for Year 8. So then you have to say no, and the department says, but they live in zone, and so then you start going, oh, I'm starting to get very ill about this process. So enrolments become a big bit of business. We feel every time a child leaves, we'll fill their place virtually the next day. That is, teachers find that, like, kids change, you know, like you never get, your classes will always be bigger than what we had wanted them to be, but that is simply because of the pressure. And I've talked about how to maintain and capture our, and it doesn't end. Like it won't, you're part of now the story, you're part of the journey for being here, and I thank you for joining us. But the ending is we've got to keep getting it better. So thank you all very much for listening.